Yeah, man. How you hanging over there? You've been doing a lot of these?
I've been doing some Zoom stuff just because, like there's people, it's a good way to do the group, good way to do the group thing. It's a good way to good way to talk to a bunch of people at once. I haven't done any bass master classes this way yet, but that's coming. I'm sort
I
of
think that's a good thing for you, man. That would be great.
I'm working on practicing with some tech that I have. That's the thing. I mean, it's like with anything, you want to make sure your tech knowledge is solid. So
Yeah.
like there's been a couple people I've been trying to like practice stuff with just to make sure I know how it sounds on their end.
Right on. Yeah, I did the same thing before I did all this for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I also know I've been getting some Zoom burnout, so
Me too,
I'll
man.
sometimes I'll just say no. I just feel like nah, I don't want to chat tonight. Kind of just want to like
It's happening, man. Actually, it's funny. I was listening to your podcast today. I was kind of having a shitty day and just really anxious and super stressful. And then I wanted to hear something else from your podcast. I've listened to two or three already, and I found the one with your old therapist, and it was amazing. It was so
oh,
great. And I remember even, I'm sure this was like a month and a half ago you two spoke, but even talking about Zoom burnout then, and it's true.
yeah, it's hard because I think people want to check in with each other, and that I think that's good.
Yeah.
But I think just the amount of time that people might spend on their devices now, I think that's a tough thing to mitigate.
I mean, that's what's been affecting me personally. When the days when I feel bad, about halfway through the day, I'm like, why do I feel like this? Oh yeah, like I've been like on my device all day long, like checking
Yeah,
out the news and stuff. Like that's enough.
yeah. I think even if your goals are just to stay informed or just to sort of have an idea of what's going on, it's a lot. And then while you're doing that, people are hitting you up, and that's
Yeah,
not a bad thing. That's a beautiful
not at
thing.
all.
But
It is. Yeah,
just the amount of stuff at once, we're not designed for that.
it's true.
And I just think this is a very heightened environment that most
Yeah.
people are in. It's not easy to exist like that. So a couple weeks ago, I like kind of put it all down. Like I didn't post for a while, and I also stayed off my phone mostly.
Yeah.
Unless there was like something that I needed to know. Like my friend Travis Carlton, he lives down the street from me, and there was
Uh-huh.
some protests going on up the road, and he's like, yo, you might not want to go down this way if you're out and
Oh,
about. It was okay, but like, at that point, no one really knew what was happening.
yeah.
So, it's good to stay in touch, and I'm really grateful we have this technology. It's great to do
Big
something
time.
like this. But yeah, it's hard. I think we gotta like self-care is the operating
It's everything.
principle.
It's everything, man. There were a couple days last week where I woke up, I put my phone in another room, and I would just like practiced and read a book all day, and it's the best I've felt the whole time.
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, if we're in this kind of era where people want to know what's going on, especially because things are, we're learning things all the time about, in this case, COVID-19. Everyone wants to know what's going on with that.
Right.
Um, there's other things going on that are really important. So I think, not even just the big news stories, like all the other things, like,
Yeah.
there's just a lot, man. It's
It's a
not
lot,
really,
and it's a
yeah,
lot every day. And
yeah,
we don't have our regular lives where we're busy all the time. So we're just like home with a computer screen usually in front of our faces, taking it in all day, every day.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think some of that is good because I think and I'm not trying to steer it here, but like I think that's why a lot of people really resonated with certain things and got angry and wanted to, but I think a lot of people, that's the really hard part about this is like,
Yeah.
and that's why I wanted to do that episode with Dr. Bodnar, because like most people I know, including me, we all define ourselves by the work we do,
That's right.
And so when you can't do that, it's hard. I mean, I don't personally feel like my connection to music is just through live gigs,
Yeah.
but the balance of it, how it relates to the other stuff that I do, like from like making music on my own or doing sessions for people, or like that, the balance of all those things are what make me feel good about playing.
Of
But
course.
I'm feeling the deficiency right now of not being able to play and have things be as they are when it's a fun playing situation,
Yeah.
So that's a tough thing. And I know like some people, like there's a bunch of bass players I talk to in LA, and they're all like really great players, and they're all doing like great things individually. And like some of the people are like, yeah, I don't really like doing stuff on my own. Like I want to show up and be part of the thing. Whereas I thrive in that situation because I end up writing a lot, and I end up like, I need kind of like the yin and the yang of that part of creation.
Yeah. I mean, I sent you a message when I heard the first, I don't remember which one it was, but one of the earlier podcasts, I sent you a message because I got excited because, I mean, you and I, we've talked, from a distance, and we met years ago through friends, and, but we've never got to hang face to face really. And so I just got excited to hear another bass player say how excited they get about being a leader and, working on their things on their own, and not, I don't want to say not being afraid of that, but really being excited about that. And that's part of your identity. It's not just I show up and play other people's music, which is a very bass centric idea. That's what we kind of get used to.
Right. Yeah. That, and I think there's like a valid reason to do both, but I would say, since we're all kind of in this slowdown, if I had to look at my career, most of the things I've done, even with other musicians, came from me doing my own thing. Know? And so, and I guess there's not really a template for that. So if we're going to like pivot into talking about the podcast, I kind of approach that the same thing, like the same way. Because it's like I don't really know what I'm doing. Like I know how to record stuff, and I know how to like edit, but I mean, for me, it really stemmed like this was a concept-driven idea that I had. It wasn't like, because there's obviously like there's enough podcasts between for now and the end of time. Like, there's so many of them, and I think it's the same thing with YouTube, and it's the same thing with anything where there's people making content. And I don't think people should ever let that stifle to do something or to not do something, because there's, as we've seen, there's a million great musicians, and like, you probably don't know who they are until the moment of discovery, and what's great about like the tech we have is like it's an engine of discovery, and you're able to find things and learn things. So like as I was starting to get this thing going, I definitely felt like, okay, here's one of like however many million podcast things people are going to find. But my idea for this really came from kind of wondering what people during the flu from 1918, like what were people thinking about? Like, what were people doing? And like what were musicians talking about? Like what are art, like was there any real documentation of that? And I'm sure if I had done a deep enough dive, I could find things where people are talking about what life was like for them and what it was like. And so my idea was really, well, I want to talk to my friends, and I want to see what they're doing, and I want to talk to them about like what this whole thing is. And it's really not, I have to say, like there are now when I do them, because I've done about 30 of them, and I posted the 19th one today.
Right.
I would say they progress. I feel like I'm progressively getting better at doing them because I started to care less about the minutia of the little things. Like for like the first couple ones, they're not stiff, but there's definite questions that I ask over and over again. And like there's, because they were done at a similar time, there's things that come up a few times. So like, you know, if someone's just checking them out now, it's like, I finished reading Dune 2 months ago, but if you're just it just sounds like I've been stuck on like 2 pages or something forever. You know, like, so there's that kind of thing where it's like, you try not to make the same jokes. You try not to, so I've been learning how to like keep some distance from like talking to one person, and then if I talk to someone the next day, I try not to approach it any other way that it's like a conversation with anybody else. And then if I need to edit something out, I will. But like, honestly, I think the one where I started to feel like, okay, I'm getting into how this works really was when I talked to John Herrera, who is an editor. He worked for Babe Song Magazine.
I listened to that whole thing, not to cut in, but it was a long one, and it was worth it all the way to the end, because you can tell how much you guys know each other and get along and really have similar thoughts about things. It was a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. So, I mean, there's things in this that I didn't really think that much about in terms of subject matter, because, you know, I'm not shy about my political opinions, but I also don't feel like that has to be part of everything. But if it comes up, I'm not opposed to talking about it, under the guise that like, I'm a musician and I'm in the world and I've toured and I've seen different parts of the world. But, you know, it's like, I'm like anybody else. Like, I have my opinions, but I'm not here to like say, you know, I'm not here to be an authority on anything. It's just, you know, people observe things as they're living their lives. And I think everyone has, you know, that's the thing, like most musicians, probably because they travel, but probably because a lot of the people that they know, and this is the beauty of being a musician, you meet people from different types of backgrounds and stuff. I mean, people are constantly thinking about this stuff. So that's why it's always funny to me when people get mad or they want to somehow have that separate from the whole conversation. But even if it's not there, it's certainly part of it. But, you know, some episodes have leaned heavily on that and some of them haven't at all, you know? And so there's not, and like even talking about like COVID, like usually it's not that much about that as much as it is, you know, what are people doing in the day-to-day now that they can't, you know? But it's not, it hasn't turned into this like Dune fest really, you know? It's been more it's been lighter, but it's also, you know, like there's some gems of honesty. Like some people say some really, like there's stuff that Tim LaFave said that I was pretty knocked out by, because Tim, besides just being a great player, his views on like the business and kind of where things work and how it works, like he's always been very savvy like that, you know? Like
very much so.
So, you know, I really appreciate what he has to say. There's a few others that are not out yet. Like the one I talked to Julie Slick about some stuff. She had interesting things to say. I think Charlie Hunters is coming out next week. Charlie's a really intelligent guy. Mm-hmm. He knows a lot about history, and so we get into some stuff there. But I mean, I don't know. So the idea really is just to have some kind of a conversation that sounds organic and isn't really, there's no agenda. I don't have any new music to plug, so nobody's really plugging anything, but it is really just a way, you know, from a selfish reason. The other part to this that really was important to me was like, I wanted to talk to my friends. Yeah. And, you know, it's like, I didn't necessarily want to admit, okay, I get lonely, I live by myself. So this is a way to give me like extra time in the week to be focused on something. And, you know, because it takes a while to edit. They're not impossible to edit now, but like, because I've found different ways to record them that makes it easier, I guess. So they're all done via internet, you know. I started out using Skype. Skype, depending on the connection, can be all right. Zoom seems to be better. Yeah. We just do audio, and what's great about recording Zoom is you get both sides of the audio. Yeah. And you also get the composite. So what's good about that is if anything ever gets lost or people sort of talk over each other, you can, if it's really obnoxious or hard to like, you know, like two people say words at the same time and it's like, what is that? Like, yeah. if it's really an important part of the conversation and not an easy thing to edit out, then it's worth, taking that approach to like the production, but it's sort of low tech because of that circumstance anyway. Like there's limits to online stuff, but like I've been able to sort of process it and add compression and EQ and logic, and it sounds pretty cool. Like I tested on a few devices, like I have my car, I have my phone, headphones, and then I have like a sound bar for my TV, so I can stream it through Apple TV and just see if it's
right on
terrible or not. So it's been getting a little bit better. Each week it gets a little bit better.
Yeah. No, I've noticed that. I was going to ask you what program you use to edit, so you use Logic.
I use Logic, yeah. And then, I basically, so I guess the approach I took, since that was part of the description, the hardest part for me was really just, it wasn't hard, it was just a lot of digging around. Like, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about how podcasts work because I didn't understand. I mean, it wasn't hard to figure this out, but essentially you just need to host it somewhere. And then everything grabs the RSS feed and that's it. It's not like all that audio is sitting somewhere on a server that Apple has access to. What it's doing is it's routing from whatever source people are listening to it. It's routing it to where it's being hosted. So this isn't a plug, and I don't have sponsorship yet, but like I've been using Squarespace for my website for a long time, and they have decent podcast hosting. So I just decided to use that since I'm already paying for it. And I would like to eventually, maybe in a year, like I'll be able to monetize. I think it's just a slow build,
How do you see that happening? I think people are really curious about that because you're doing this because we have a lot of time and it's a positive thing to do and it just made sense. But you had mentioned something about monetizing it in the future. What does that look like for you? What do you think?
Well, I think right now, I guess, and this is sort of how I compare it to playing an instrument. Like I'm not really looking at my analytics and I'm not really looking at like, I'm just trying to be consistent with it. And I think I need to give it like a year,
Yeah.
And if I feel like I can get good people to keep coming on, or if I think I can get repeat visits with other people where it's useful and I feel like the content is like decent enough, then I can make a push for like, hey, I'm trying to do this thing. But yeah, I mean, the beauty of it is like there's stuff I don't know about, and I think not to get doom and gloom about it, but I don't think some of these circumstances are going to change anytime soon.
Yeah.
So I'm going to try to, I guess the thing is this concept could morph, but even let's say like they found a vaccine tomorrow, I mean, there's still going to be fallout from this whole thing. So even though this isn't really about COVID-19, it's about COVID-19 being a factor in life and sort of killing a major chunk of what most musicians do, which is play gigs and tour. But like, I still think there'd be a way to like continue it after that, but I don't know. I don't think I would change the format too much. I don't think I'd have to be honest.
No.
Like, but it's weird. I was thinking about this because, I've had some great players on there. It's not a bass podcast at all. Like me and Tim didn't talk about bass more than one time, and it was about a pedal. Me and Evan Marion didn't talk really about bass at all. Like it's just kind of like, like what Nintendo Switch games are you playing? Like, it's not, it's because I think that's been covered enough, I think there's very specific avenues that I have if people want to talk about that, I think it depends who it is. Like there's some other people I'm trying to get on there, and there might be some of that on there, but it's not like, that's not really the premise of it, It could change though.
Is your focus to stay with people that you know? Because so far you're really interviewing just people that you know, and it comes across as that, which is fantastic because it's just a hang, and a discussion with, somebody that you know about. So is that going to continue, or you're going to start to branch out?
Well, I think for the most part, that is just a way to keep it safe in the beginning. Who can I get who would be interesting to talk to that I know? but there's people that I don't know as well that I've had on there, you know, like there's been a couple where like we're not like so far removed from each other, but you know, it's like there's always going to be, you know, the need to like talk to different people. But yeah, no, I want to talk. There's a bunch of people I really want to get on that like I don't know that well. But,
Yeah, I think the fact that you started the way you did it allowed you a platform to kind of learn what you're doing and get comfortable with it, which has been cool.
Yeah, I had to. But you know, there's even people that I know really well that I've traveled the world with, and they weren't easy people to interview. You know, like I had to, like, you know, Fuzinski's a very smart man and he's really intelligent, and I love the guy, and we've made a lot of music together, but like lots of dead air in between question and answer. And so I edited the shit out of it.
Yeah.
And then like he cleared his throat a couple times. I'm like, man, like I don't think people are going to want to hear that. So I had to like I just look for the giant transient and logic and like cut that out. And I think that's the thing, just in the interest of like in the interest of people not wondering like if their AirPods just died on them, you know, like you have to like you don't want the space to be unnaturally cut together, but you don't want to have too much. So
I think that's a cool skill too, is learning to edit as well, because it's taking something that, you know, I think a conversation is natural even when it's unnatural. I mean, we're not all great at speaking all the time to each other. You know, it's natural to have pauses, but you don't want a listener to hear that on a podcast, you know, I mean. So learning how to edit is pretty cool too.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say that the way I have mine structured right now, and I haven't committed to this forever, but the way it starts is like there's like theme music, which is not long, and then I talk for a little bit and then play the interview. And recording the bits before the interview is hard because initially it's you don't want it to sound wooden and you don't want it to sound stiff. So I experimented with writing something out and reading it, but then I felt like, well, it sounds like I wrote this out and I'm reading it.
Yeah.
So I guess what I sort of do is like I have like the first paragraph mapped out. I have some bullet points. I just try to improvise. Yeah. And the minute I fall off, I'll just like pull the thing back and hit record again from that point. And then it sounds more like someone's talking to you. I don't want it to really sound like I'm reading, but I just found myself when I was getting to that part when I'd edit each episode, it's like, God, why do I hate this part of it so much? Like, what is it? And I think it's because, like, you know, for some reason, if I had, you know, a few people like watching me talk, it's not hard to do, but I'm just sitting in my room with like, you know, like one light on, sitting in front of this mic, and it's like it doesn't feel natural. But you know,
to your credit, man, it sounds really natural. So whatever you figured out, it sounds great.
I credit that to edibles. Sorry to not to. I really, it's just about kind of getting comfortable. Although the last couple I've done, really, it was just I had this idea. Okay, structure, get in and get out, whatever you want to say about the person who's on, and then just do it. You know, I think I don't always say that much before the interview part because I don't feel like it has to always be that. I don't know though, you know, like there's other ideas I have for the future, and I don't know that this is its final form, but I think thematically it's not going to go too far from this, you know? Like I would love to get to a point where it's a creative thing where it's like I would love to have this thing where like everyone makes a track and then like, you know, like I think Deitch is going to do one, and Deitch loves making tracks, but it's like I don't want to get too far off the thing just yet. Like I think that could come later. Yeah. You know, like I thought about playing on the outro like Marin does with guitar, but it's like I don't know, man. Like there's plenty of time to get into that shit. But for now, it's like I'm trying to stick to the tiny parameters I've given myself and just see how much I can do with like just who I'm talking to and what we talk about. But yeah, I'm definitely trying to get more people on that maybe don't do podcasts, but it's weird. Some people really love doing it, and other people that you have to like kind of like poke them a little bit.
Yeah. No, I understand. Man, I mean, like for me, like you have always seemed like, and it comes through on the podcast, like somebody who's really confident in who they are and really easygoing. And I mean, I know there are other aspects to your personality that we all have, but it just comes through as like you're just like hanging out in your living room, like, hey, folks, like this is what I have to talk about. This person's cool. Like, I hope you dig it. It's just so laid back. Like for me, like a part of why I've been doing this the last 4 weeks is because I'm not a natural leader and I'm like a nervous wreck all the time,
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah.
actually a way to work on something that I'm not strong at.
Yeah.
But
I've been
uh,
using it for that too.
have you? I was
Yeah, because
curious about that.
I'm gonna be working. I mean, I'm trying to add more videos to what I put out as
Right
content,
on.
and I've been wanting to do like more stuff for a while, and like with YouTube, it's like I have no problem playing in front of my camera. I have no problem like doing that, but when I have to talk, it's like it's
Yeah.
always a little bit like this weird thing. So I just one day decided, okay, I could be doing stuff in this realm and probably do well at it, but like what's preventing me from doing that, and why am I like hung up on it? Like
Yeah.
what's the thing that's like getting in the way of that? Because I think the other thing about this time period is like everyone knows what they would do if they had more time, and now that there's more time, it's like how much do I want to bullshit myself? Do I? So I really started thinking about it, and so I think talking to the camera and like looking like right into the thing, like that's something I need to get better at doing, and talking and kind of, it's easy for me to write shit. Like writing words is probably like one of my strong suits. So like for years on Facebook and Twitter, and I don't encourage you guys to follow me on there because it's just, now I just say nonsense. And if you don't know me, it's just going to seem weird. You could, I mean, it's fine. But like, I feel like on Facebook, I'm just talking to people that know me, so it's not, like it's not that I'm saying anything so bad, but it's just like, why does this guy hate fireworks? Or like, it's one of those things where, like writing stuff down, you can kind of mess with it and stuff, but to be able to communicate like with a camera and speak to it, that I've found that to be sort of it just feels difficult. Maybe it's
Yeah.
not, maybe it's really not that hard. I mean, I think if one remembers that someone's going to watch it on the end of it, or at least for a second, someone might be engaged, you're speaking to them.
Yeah.
Um, so that's it, I mean, and as far as the intent of the podcast and who I'm aiming it towards, I feel like there's people that are having a hard time and they're not really able to express why they're having a hard time. So maybe if they hear me and someone else, we're just kind of slogging through different stuff. I mean, I think relatability and solidarity is important. I don't know, it's not all rooted in wanting to connect to that, but I think, I've always felt like, when I've had moments where I wasn't sure about something, like, I mean, I remember like I got into Mark Maron's podcast when I was at a
Yeah.
real low in life, like in 2011. Like I'm not gonna take you all through the dark depths of my past, but like it was a transitional period, and like I just broken up with my girlfriend and I had to move, and it wasn't great, and I felt like I was starting over again. And hearing him kind of talk about, like, he wasn't that far into his podcast. Like I think he was 2 years in, so he had established a rhythm, and some of the really great episodes he had done had happened, like the one with Louis C.K. where they kind of reconcile, and it's two
Yeah.
episodes. But just the vulnerability and the honesty and just hearing people talk about, I always feel like comedy has parallels to music in some ways. It seems harder than music because I think like you can't hide behind anything when it's just you and a mic. But I think what I found parallels in come from like having to have an identity, and you can't really pretend to be someone else in comedy. And obviously, think about what music would look like if people went after musicians who copied stuff, like the way joke thieves get like ostracized. I mean, I think there's a healthy amount of that, but I think there's also some of it where it's like, really, so it's, I don't know, but I think just hearing someone operate in that realm, and talk about how that craft works and like what that life is like. I mean, I found it very relatable, you know. And then obviously when I lived in New York for like 13 years, that world was very accessible. So I would hang out sometimes at the Cellar, or I'd like walk around where some of those clubs were and pop in and watch stuff. So I don't know, like I think a lot of that came from like just that podcast thing, like finding something to listen to, and, you know, and even listening to people I wasn't really a fan of, but thinking like, wow, that person says interesting things, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's the goal. It's like talk about stuff that people are probably thinking, but maybe are not, you know, articulating, you know, I
Right.
don't know.
I think it's a cool, I'm curious, I'll ask you in a minute, but something you said a few weeks ago when we first talked about this. I think it's pretty cool as musicians. We're usually looking at different things. Like I knew you were really into comedy, you know, and I think that a lot of us find other mediums to take from and to learn from. And I can see, like I could hear on the podcast that you, I mean, I know your humor anyway, but I can hear on the podcast how you are into comedy. You know, I can hear how you're into podcasts. I can hear some of your influences that aren't musical. So for me, that's pretty cool because, you know, I've listened to you as a musician for years and I know that side of you. And then I think it's cool that we get to learn other sides of people that we admire for one thing, and we get to see them do something else and we learn something new about them. And I think that's exciting. I think that the time that we're in right now, and I keep trying to tell other musicians the same thing because it's getting me through, is I think it's a great time to be focusing on and thinking about what else do we have? What else are we? Because as musicians, we're not just musicians.
Yeah.
You know, that's just something that we love and we do and we're passionate about. But what else can we work on during this time because we can't play live? And I love what you're doing with your time.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I know. I think about that whole thing a lot, you know, like what, you know, as far as like the way music works, and not to take this out of the equation, like it's not really important, but like if like what are people actually getting from playing gigs besides the monetary compensation? Like what is it? And there's a range of things, you know, like for some people, okay, there's the monetary part. For other people, they're realizing an artistic thing, you know, and maybe there's, for other people, it's a little bit of column A and column B. There's also an excitement factor that comes from like, you know, it always sounds like magical thinking, but really if you're doing something like that in front of people, you can't really duplicate that when you're not in front of people, not in the same way. And I think there's such a delicate relationship between an audience and the audience being part of the project, even if they're not the writers of it, or like they're not part of the concept of where it came from, but they're part of the concept of realization. And so I think like the void that people are dealing with, like that's a real thing. Like I know there are people who are mourning that, you know, and it's going to be hard until it's not. And
yeah,
I don't really like any of the alternatives, you know, because to me, like drive-through concerts just sound like the worst fucking part of going to a concert, which is like parking. And then, you know, I mean, it could be great. It just depends on like where, you know, like if the concert was in some kind of see, this would be an acoustic nightmare, but if it was like a parking garage where there were like levels and you know, I could see it working. I could also see like one of those really acoustically treated like truck containers that people play in at NAMM.
Yeah.
It's not like I could see maybe people doing that. I don't know, man. It's like we weren't meant to play in these giant plastic bubbles.
No.
You know what I mean? Like that's not what I signed up for. And I think there's like adapt or die, but then I think there's like this is just dumb. Like you know. So I think
I think the things that you're saying are all just trying to be positive, and I think that's what we're all trying to do. And some days I do it well, sometimes I don't. You know, eventually, like we're gonna be it's going to come back. It's going to take time. I agree with you. I think it's going to take a good amount of time.
Yeah.
I think that the one positive thing, and also this came up in the podcast I was listening to today of yours, is what I hope is that there'll be more community-based concerts and smaller things. And the large tours are gone for a while. Like, you're not going to be able to put 50,000 people in an arena. It's just not going to happen.
No.
That shit's gone.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's where people were making money.
Yeah. No, I think about every tour I've done, and I've thought about, like, there's been nights where I haven't slept. Probably some of us can all relate. It's hard to, it's just like a weird era. But I was thinking about places I played in New York, like tours I went on, like, and how many people just in passing that you come into contact with. And at least for now, it doesn't seem like any of that's feasible. Yeah. Like playing a place, I think it's gone, right? The Stone is gone. I played the Stone once.
The original Stone's gone.
Yeah. I played there once, and I remember feeling like this place is super intimate, man.
I loved it.
And then the 55 bar, like, I don't know how anyone would go.
That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's just because you're basically on top of everybody. Like, I think the only venue that sort of seems like it could have some stuff would be like Shapeshifter, because it's big.
Yeah, it's big.
Like, I haven't talked to Matt, but I wonder if they're operating at all or doing anything. But
that's a good question.
But like everything else, man, like from flying to going on like the trains, like in Europe, like that's how I've done a lot of tours. There's been a couple where it was like decent tour bus type stuff, but like the train thing, just having like a really good Eurail pass and stuff, like you're constantly going through people all the time. So it's like, and honestly, that's the beauty of it. But yeah, but now that it's sort of a thing that's like it's a risk. It's hard to fathom how that would get done now.
I don't think that it can. I mean, so to my question, and then I would love to open it up to questions for everybody as well. To my question, you had mentioned you think that podcasts in general could kind of be a way forward for musicians, something positive during this time. Is that exactly why you think that? Because we're not touring, we're not going out, and this is a way to express yourself and kind of like create a community, even if it's online?
Yeah, well, I think podcasts, I think any of the collaborations we've seen, I think people just getting into making films and making music for those films, like starting a Patreon if you think that's where your fans are going to support you the most, like doing education stuff. I mean, I think there's an unrealistic premise that's somehow got introduced at the beginning of this thing. It's like, yo, this is going to be a renaissance period. And everyone's going to make amazing music. And like 3 weeks in, people are like, bro, I can barely muster enough inspiration to do whatever. Like there's a period of time where I think people needed to get used to whatever it is. And then not to mention the stresses of just meeting your obligations, which, like miraculously I've been able to do. But like, it's not easy, man. So I think staying engaged creatively in any capacity, when I see those videos where people are collaborating, I've only done a couple, like I don't know if you guys know who Isamu McGregor is. He's an excellent keyboard player. He was doing this thing called Stuck at Home Records. And the idea, like, I think he did like 6 or 7 weeks of these where people would just get put together, you'd write something, and at the end of the week you have this fully realized track. And, it was kind of I did one. It was fun to do one. It's also like musical Jenga, because like 3 elements could be really great, and then the last one could kind of like make it weird. Yeah. And I didn't love what happened with mine. Like, I felt like the drums in the first part were cool, but then this guy was doing like a mouth trumpet thing, and I was like, oh,
I'm out.
No offense, yeah. No offense to any mouth trumpet players out there, but I just was like, nah. So, but still, even if that's the case, just the idea of having a collective thing that people are going to work on together. Like, I think that's awesome. And like, even if it's not something that people are going to remember past the time that they watch it, just being engaged and like having to think of a way to like create around something that gets sent to you, I think that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think just finding something to do to keep the creativity moving, if possible. You know, it may not, you know, like, I don't, like, put it like this, like, I don't expect to be like one of those like Joe Rogan or something, like, who's going to make all this money because he's on spot, he's going to move it to Spotify exclusively. Like,
Oh, wow.
I don't really see that happening necessarily, but like, I could see just turning this into a thing where I have cool people on and we have good talks, and like, hopefully there's still lots of cool people left in the world over these next couple of years and they'll want to come on the thing and talk, you know, and then maybe it'll morph into like musical collaborations or stuff, or maybe not. But I think for right now, I mean, it's interesting to hear like what people are just saying about what life is right now.
Yeah. Man, awesome. I could keep asking questions, but I want to open it up to everybody.
Sure.
Does there anybody have any questions? Ooh, silence. No questions?
I think it's because we were all muted, buddy.
Now any questions?
Hey, Steve, man, I just want to say I really appreciate your time.
Thanks,
really
man.
Appreciate being here, and it's cool to hear. You know, so I don't know necessarily how relevant what I'm about to say right now is exactly to what we've been talking about, but podcasting is a thing. Andy will tell you that I've been sleepily talking about for like a few years now, about like wanting to start a podcast, and really it's just never, you know, come to the forefront for me because I'm always, you know, like I'm always on the gig or like doing something else. And so like if ever there's a time to like mobilize a podcast, it's like, you know, now.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned Stuck at Home Records. Adam Schenk, Andy, is like has been on a few of those.
Oh, really?
Yeah. He's always plugging it on Instagram.
Right on.
Yeah, it's cool. There's been some good ones.
So, and I don't know. I guess, and again, this isn't maybe the most relevant question to like what we were just talking about, but
that's fine.
But and so for me, and like where I'm at with like my knowledge of things, like I can definitely like I can get around a little bit of editing enough to probably get by and stuff. But really, the things that I'm curious about starting a podcast is like, you know, like where do you start and what do you do? Like so you know, obviously you probably record in Logic or whatever, right? And you know, then how do you, and I guess forgive me for the disjointedness of like how this question is coming across, but you know, how do you get it from recording the podcast, like physically recording it into like whatever, you know, sequencer you're going to use, to someone can search it on their iPhone and voila, there it is. Like, what are the mechanical steps from point A to point B?
Okay. Well, okay. So the first thing, I talked about hosting. That's probably like after you've recorded some stuff. So the way in which I do it is, and because I'm limited to doing like video, or not video, audio conversations via the internet, I haven't really experimented with phone. I've just been doing like over high-speed internet. So I can tell you from experience that Skype is okay and Zoom is better. The way that I do that is I use a microphone, the same one I'm using now. Like I'm using this.
What mic is that?
I'm actually just using my Apogee 1, which has like a built-in mic. I'm gonna be upgrading my entire interface pretty soon. Like but I'm just waiting for some checks that I'm owed for some work that I did, but which they're coming. But it's also like I got to wait for a lull in some work I'm doing because I'm in the middle of someone's project. But
Right on.
the mic in this thing is actually pretty good, and it's I can kind of move it wherever I need to. But like I just use that as my way to communicate with people. There might have been one episode where I got audio from my voice from the computer and it sounds like I'm further away, but this is decent. So I use my mic and I just change that in the settings. You can do that on any of those platforms, like on Skype, when you're just checking like the audio and video stuff, you can test it out and see how it sounds.
Sure, yeah.
But I'm pretty impressed with how this thing works just for what it is. I'm going to upgrade that part. But so what happens is like we record the episode. On Skype, you can just hit record. On Zoom, you can hit record. What's interesting is like when Zoom's done, you get this like neat little folder that has like the MP3 of the whole conversation with both sides of the conversation together. And then there's also each individual side. So that means like just my side of it and then the other person's side of it. And then what I would do if I wanted to use those, I haven't really done anything where I've done that. Like I usually can tell if the audio is cool, if it's just the composite. And if there's anything that, like I said, that sounds like maybe we spoke at each other and we, got weird and it might not be pleasant for someone to listen to necessarily. If it's really bad, I'll cut it out. Usually I leave it. But what's cool about that whole thing is because if I have my audio and then the guest's audio, I can edit and I can like, if I want to like put a different kind of EQ on their voice because maybe it sounds different, I can do that. But essentially the way I do that is like, I guess you could use any kind of audio software where you can edit. Like you could probably do it in GarageBand. I'm a Logic person, and so my knowledge coming into this comes from home recording and not knowing very much about producing like radio or just spoken word type stuff. So then I don't know my process has really been twofold. Like I'll try, like there's 3 effects that I'll put on each track. Like there's the de-esser, which is supposed to make like any words with like hard S's and stuff, and it kind of smooths them out so it doesn't sound like someone's like slicing your ear off. I don't know. And then I use some compression and then some EQ. And the EQ is probably the trickiest one because there's some really great presets in Logic, but some of them, they're real heavy on the low end. And it makes, it's like, as much as I want to sound like James Earl Jones, like there's a point where it's just unnatural. So I have to pull down some of the frequencies. A lot of it's just trial and error. And then what I'll do if I'm not sure, and I did this a lot in the beginning, I'd like bounce maybe like a minute of it and listen to it on something just to see how close I'm getting to making it work. And then there's like other little tricks, like if I clear my throat or if I swallow or it sounds like I just took a drink of something and then the mic picks it up, I might like automate it so the volume drops out for that part, then comes up right before I'm about to talk. So there's little things like that, but I would say my production knowledge of this is piggybacking off of my knowledge from doing audio production. And then I would also say, and this is not me, like for real, I use YouTube a lot to find out stuff. Like how do I get this sound? How do I get that sound? And through the kindness of people's hearts, there's all these instructional videos where I can kind of learn about what to do, and I'm still not all there with it, but that's kind of what's gotten me to this point. The other thing is I have enough friends that work in audio, so if it sucks, I know I'll hear about it. They'll just be like, hey, try this, And I'm sort of hoping that happens. Like I'm hoping someone will say, listen, you need to like lop off a little bit of 1K here. And I'm like, okay, cool. What's 1K?
Yeah, that's great, man.
Yeah.
That's
Hey
great.
Steve, at this point, how long does it usually take for you to edit everything?
Um, well, okay, the other part to it is that I have a template set up now where, so when I open Logic and start a new session, the intro, the scrambled vocals that are like 5 seconds long, and then yeah, all that stuff is kind of already there. So then basically what I do is like I take the track or tracks from like the interview, I drop that in, and then there's a track for voiceover. What I do now is like I just mute everything, do the voiceover, move all the tracks into place, move the outro music into place. Like I know how long into the part where everyone's saying goodbye to each other, like where the
Yeah.
fade in has to start, and then from the last like syllable of the last word that was spoken in the podcast, that's where I start my like, thanks for listening, blah blah blah, you know, and then that's it. And then as I'm doing that, I'm starting to type up the descriptions on Squarespace, and so I can probably do one under an hour.
That's amazing.
But there's a couple that I have to do that had some technical glitches, like not in terms of audio, but just like the calls got interrupted. So I'm gonna have to go through those and listen and hear what happened, and like where a good point would be to whatever. And then the other thing is, for whatever reason, I'm getting people to be really candid, and it's not because like I'm trying to like prod them into telling me like dirty secrets and shit, but like just, you know, there's, now I always ask people at the end, like, is there anything you said that like you don't want on there? Because I think sometimes people in the moment they'll say stuff, but then it's like, oh wait, you know, I don't know if I want, you know, not that it would be the most controversial thing, but you just never know. You know, it's, you never know exactly like who's doing what as far as that stuff goes. So it's better just to err on that side of like, you know, if I hear anything that sounds like remotely scandalous, and there hasn't been a ton of that, but just, you know, I mean, John didn't really care about talking shit about his 30 Seconds from Mars audition.
That was epic.
Yeah, it was funny, man. Like, and like, who cares, dude? Like, if that whole thing, that whole element of the business, like, who cares? And the thing is, like, I've heard other stories about that guy and that band, like Jared Leto's band.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I don't care. Like, that whole, if that shit doesn't come back, I'm fine with it. Just that whole like fake Hollywood bullshit. You know, that's just, I don't know.
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, whatever, man. I want everybody to do their art, but like, just that whole thing, I don't know. That was one of the funniest things I ever heard, man.
I enjoyed that thoroughly, man. I mean, we all know that stuff happens, but then when you hear somebody that, you know, that actually had that experience tell the story, it's gold.
Yeah, I think more people need to talk about that stuff.
I agree.
There's no incentive for people to not be transparent, especially now, because like, what do you save by doing that?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I guess like, I don't know. That's the other part is like, I really have been trying to get people who I know won't do that, you know? But it also depends. Like, it also depends on like what it is. Like there's a deeper conversation I could have had with Ahmed about the Star Wars universe, because he played one of the most hated characters.
Oh, I haven't heard that one yet. That's right.
Yeah, and there's a lot to it, you know, and there's but it's also something he's talked about a lot. So
yeah, Jar Jar.
Yeah. So you know, because I mean, he and I always talk about Star Wars, like on some level, like when we hang out and stuff, like there's always like a little bit of discussion about like when Last Jedi came out, he was like, man, I'm not seeing that. Or he's like, I'm not going to see it for a while. And you know, it's like, there's always these weird little things, but you know, in terms of like racism and stuff, I mean, he and I have been talking about that for a long time. Like when they showed that first snippet of footage where John Boyega's in the stormtrooper suit in the desert, and he like springs up, and there's all these people writing terrible things. Like, I mean, he was like, look, just imagine people with that much vitriol that didn't have instant ways to express that and then to learn how to code just to write some hateful shit, you know, about. So, you know, that's definitely not something I wanted to push him to talk about too much, because he's talked about it a lot. And it's also like, we're friends, so it's like I don't want to pull up things just to be like, here, like, let's entertain the folks with this. Like, you know, it's more like, if it's going to go there gradually, or if it's going to be a natural way to talk about it, then sure. But like, this isn't really a Star Wars centric podcast either. So it's just, but you know, his take on a lot of those things is really interesting. So, you know, it's like, it's one of those weird things. But yeah, I like honesty. And it's not honesty in that like people are calling out stuff that like actually matters. Dude, who cares about 30 Seconds to Mars? They're not like the Foo Fighters or some big band. Like, they're kind of a C-level band at best, right?
Yeah. And, all that stuff will always be there. If somebody has money and they want something, more than likely they'll get it, you know?
Yeah.
So in the end, like, truth or not truth, like, that's going to happen. It's all right.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, you know, I mean, no one's saying anything that scandalous on here. It's not.
No.
You know, it's not, luckily it's not that kind of thing. It's not that deep, but, you know, from an anecdotal standpoint, it's funny.
But I think that's part of what I really like about your podcast, is that it really takes from, I mean, you know, like some of those comedians podcasts, you know, without saying names, but because it's just an honesty to it. It's just a hang. It's a very open discussion. And it's, you know, it's not like you have a topic. Like today we had a topic and we've kind of gone pretty wide around it, you know?
Yeah.
And I like that, you know, and I like that you have an outlet for that. And I don't know, man, there's nothing boring about hearing people, even if they're musicians, not talking about music. Like, if it's a great discussion, it's a great discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Does anybody have a question? We can always go back to podcasts if we want.
Actually, I had a question. And first of all, Steve, thank you for doing this. And Andrew, thank you for putting this together.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
And I came a little later, so maybe this passed the muster already. But I was actually wondering, and I'm kind of new to podcast, but say you plan for a podcast for a length of 45 minutes. How much material do you, on general, think you need to record in order to come to a successful, well-edited set of 45 minutes?
It's weird because in the beginning, I thought I was going for an hour. Like, I was going to try to get like a solid hour. And the more I talked to certain people, sometimes those conversations got longer. And unless like there's things that I felt like were redundant with other episodes, then I would edit that stuff out. But as of late, I've put up some that are pretty long, and just based on feedback that I've gotten from people, it hasn't been like an unwelcome addition to whatever it is they're doing. Because I think like the real thing is like, if there's a specific thing I wanted to talk about, like, so I did an episode where I had my old therapist on there, and that was a shorter episode. We were really only talking about one thing. So I think if I had a really specific goal for that episode, that's where I would probably really work on. That's like, basically I thought about going into that episode what I'm trying to do with it. And the goal of that episode was just to give maybe some words of advice to people who are having a hard time not being able to, you know, they're struggling with like not being able to do the thing that they do, you know, because of like the coronavirus impacting their jobs, or like musicians or, you know, comedians or anyone who's like in a job where they have to be around people. So I had to trim, you know, I think she and I talked for an hour, but I think I used maybe half of it because I only really wanted to address like that question. So I think that's it. But like everything else is so wide open that as long as it feels like there's an arc to it and nobody's like giving out super personal information, then I'll just cut out. I cut out all the unnecessary stuff. Like usually when I hit play and record, or when I hit record, there's no play. When I hit record, there's like a little bit of like banter before we start. And I'll usually cut that out. But lately I haven't been editing very much at all. And I just feel like if it's an hour, or if it's almost 2 hours, I'll just put it up. But if there's anything that's weird about an episode as I record it, I'll make a note of it, because I haven't gotten to the point where I'm recording these and editing them as they happen. Like I have a reserve. So right now I think I have 8 that haven't been posted yet. And so like each one I kind of have been editing mostly the same way, because I just determine after they're done, this is cool to post the whole thing. It's just going to be me checking the quality of the audio, and like I'll skip around. Sometimes I won't listen to the whole thing, but if anyone says something crazy, I'll make a note of it and be like, okay, we got to like make sure that got to make sure that sounds okay. Whatever. But no one's, that's pretty much it. So it went from this real rigid idea of having it be like an hour to like, well, who cares? It'll be an hour and a half, 2 hours, or maybe just right around an hour. That's basically it. Because I think like some of the things that I thought were worth keeping in there, we're going to make it go over that length. And I just decided that was fine. And I figured if people are engaged, and even if they can't get it all in one sitting, like they'll finish it. That's how I am. Like some of the podcasts I like they have like 2 hours, and it's like I can't listen to the full 2 hours, but I can listen to it in chunks and then just get through it. So
okay, thank you.
Sure. Thanks for being here.
I can ask you another question.
Yeah.
Because in the beginning, I think of the conversation, you and Andrew touched upon the concept of building up listenership, right? Mm-hmm. Building up an audience. How important is it to really? How important, with that in mind, do you think is it to rigidly plan the frequency of your podcasts in a weekly or bi-weekly fashion, or maybe that it doesn't matter to you at all that happens in a regular fashion? What are your thoughts on that? Basically your publishing cycle, so to speak.
Yeah, it's mostly been so when it launched, I had 3 episodes already up there, and then each subsequent week, except for a couple weeks ago, it's been mostly 2 a week. And I think consistency is really what keeps people engaged. Or if someone's just coming into something and they're like, oh, wow, this is all the time. This is something that's constantly being expanded upon, and there's new episodes every week. I think people seeing that kind of gives them incentive to tune in at a regular rate. Where it's like, it's like how many people do you know that started like a blog, and you see like the first little entry and it's like 2014, hey, I started a blog, and then you go back and there's like that same entry and nothing else. Like it's
right.
I think it's just like committing to doing stuff on the regular. But I think ultimately in any of the platforms that people use, like whether it's YouTube or Instagram, I'm actually trying to get back on the Instagram horse with making videos. I've been making a bunch, but I'm waiting until next month, like July 1st, where we start going hard with that again. But really that's what helps anything. Like if people see enough of it, it sort of gets the attention of whoever. I don't really know that podcasts are affected by algorithms the way other platforms are, but I think like it really comes down to doing it enough. And then if someone who likes somebody who I'm talking to, I think that's why there's like just trying to keep it in the air is probably like the best way to to do that. And I'll say that like I'm only a few months in, and I don't know, I don't check my metrics that regularly, you know, because for me it's like I think maybe in a few months it makes more sense to do that. Like I'm kind of I'm new at this. I'll just see what's happening. Like this is definitely not a master class per se. It's more just like, here's what I found so far, you know, because I'm still learning as I'm doing it, you know, and I don't know that it's always going to be exactly how it is now. Like, you know, I may change some things. I may decide to, you know, the thing is, if it becomes the type of thing where it's safer to be in a room with someone, that's going to completely change some of the dynamic, because it's a different situation, and the context is a little bit different when you're in front of somebody. Probably not so different, and it's weird. Like some of the episodes really sound like we're sitting there in the same room. Like the one that's really weird, when I was listening back to it, it went up the other day with Paniotis. He was in Athens, Greece.
Was he really? Oh, wow.
Yeah. And when I listen back to it, I'm like, dude, the audio on this shit is better than like one of the ones where someone was literally 15 minutes down the road. And it's really bizarre. But that's the thing. I think there's going to constantly be some changes. And I think if it morphs to a thing where, okay, travel's a thing again, or we can go see people and it's not as dangerous or maybe not as risky, then I could see wanting to do it and talk to people in person and that whole nine. But for now, like these are very static, fixed parameters until otherwise. So I guess like I'm trying to perfect it as much as I can in an incremental sense. But I'm also trying to have fun with it. And I'm trying, you know, it's fun. It's kind of like, it's one of those things where, you know, my real job, sometimes it's hard because if people know you for a certain type of thing, or you get praised for a certain type of thing, you can get trapped by that. But this kind of it pulls me out of it. And it reminds me that like, if I approach playing bass the way I approach this, that'll keep things free and it'll keep it way more open. But sometimes, you know, there's this need for things to be great or excellent all the time. Whereas like, since I can't pretend to be more knowledgeable than I actually am, it keeps it honest, but it also means there's not a lot of fear, and I'm not going to really disappoint anybody. So the least I can do is keep my upload schedule somewhat consistent.
Right. And if I understand your workflow a little bit, you built a library of podcasts in advance, basically, right?
Just to get the ball rolling. The only thing I would say that in retrospect I hadn't thought of when I did that is that because things are going at sort of a, you know, things have changed a lot since some of these talks happened. Like one of the people I talked to.
You mean context or? Yeah,
the context. Like John Prine had been sick and then he unfortunately passed away from COVID-19. And there was one, I forgot who we were talking about. I think I was talking to Vernon Reed, and he talked about John Prine being sick and he had since passed away, you know? So it's like, you got that kind of thing. So, I mean, that's the only real, not problem, but just, I tend to contextualize that now because people need to know that like some of these were done beforehand, but I'm almost through those initial recordings. And so
will that change how you do them in the future, Steve?
Yeah. Like, I think I'd like to have no more than like 2 weeks out from when they get recorded. Like we're not reporting news and it's not right. That, but it's just, you know, like at the start of this thing, people were still talking about hand sanitizer and not being able to buy toilet paper. And that hasn't been as hard to find in recent weeks. So, you know, it's like, overall, nobody's talking about this for more than a minute, but just right. As far as like, it does sound like an anachronism sometimes because, or not, you know, it's just very dated in terms of right. How fast the situation has morphed. So that's maybe the only thing, but yeah, it just seemed like a good idea to get a bunch ready to go. and nobody was doing anything, so it was hard for them to say no.
Does anybody
All
else
right.
have any other questions? Johan, maybe you can ask another question if you have one, but if anybody else has a question, yeah, Jorge, please.
Yeah.
Hey, man.
Hey.
Thank you again for doing this, Steve and Andrew. Much appreciated. Well, I was curious to hear more about the publishing process. Like
Posing?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the way that I did that whole thing was that so after hosting, then you submit to so there's 4 that I like actively did this with. I did it with Apple Podcasts. I did this with Spotify Podcasts. I did it with Stitcher and Google Play. I did that because J-Raj was like, "Is it on Google Play?" And I'm like, "I don't know."
That's where I listen to it on.
Me too, man.
So basically all you do, it's really not that hard. You're just giving them the RSS feed address, and then they put it in their directory, and then it automatically links it to where the podcast is being hosted. So it wasn't really that hard to do. There's something with Spotify it was asking me for that I couldn't completely understand, that I figured it out. I don't remember this one because once it was basically one of those things where like if I didn't complete it right, like the little like next thing wouldn't illuminate green. But once I did, I was like, okay, cool, I'm in. And then I forgot what I did. But it's really that simple. Like I think it's because really what it is you're as soon as you have your hosting situation together, it's really just about plugging your RSS feed into these different platforms. Apple was the first one that I did. And getting it there, I think for whatever reason, like I think Apple's podcast thing is pretty legit. There's, the other thing is like, depending on who you choose to host, like Apple has a way that you can measure your analytics, and you can check out like who's listening and for how long, and you can really see what's going on. And I haven't explored the other 3 places, so I don't know. But there's one podcast hosting company called Anchor, and it's like free.
Yeah.
And I think Spotify does it. The reason why I didn't want to go with them, besides already having it with Squarespace, is they will upload stuff to Apple, but they do it under their name. So you're not really able to use the analytics. So yeah, I think my advice with hosting is like find something that you can afford, or do like one of the other ones. But like, I don't really know where this is going to go, or if it's going to just kind of be how it is and it'll have like a life however long it makes sense to keep it alive for. But if I got to a point where I could like make money off of it or get like monetization, if for things that make sense, then like I don't want a third party coming in and like deciding like what cut of that's mine, and I think like that's one of the reasons why like content creation can be a really lucrative thing, as far as like that kind of stuff goes. But you got to be in control of like where, like you're better off probably having those negotiations with sponsors yourself versus having another party do it and then you get a cut. I think that's the idea. But like I said, I'm not there yet. So I'm talking about this more in the abstract, and like, I really think this is a thing where like, I got to just stay the course, give it like a few months, like finish out a year, and then look and see what I can do with it. I got some ambitious ideas about who I'd like to have on, but it's going to be a gradual thing. And I music is still my number one thing. So I'm working on that too. So, yeah, it's going to be sort of like a incremental process, but the goal is to keep it going and just, like build from there. But yeah, that's essentially it. Like once the hardest part is just getting the hosting that makes the most sense for what you're trying to do. And then plugging in the RSS feed address is really easy.
Right on. I was just thinking this is also like when you do get back to touring, you've also created something you can do anywhere, which is super
Yeah.
happening.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, honestly, there's that too with other things. I'm trying to get that happening as well, because I really think, you know, it's not that I think the YouTubers who are making a lot of money from that are like sitting on this like they're not laughing, like, you know, but I think if one really wants to look at, so this is gonna, you know, this isn't really what this webinar was about, but I'll just, from a personal standpoint, I've been thinking about other ways to make money as a musician that don't involve touring. So COVID-19 is far from the first thing that made me think like this. But what I've kind of come to understand just from seeing the way a lot of people I admire do things, even if they do tour a lot, like having an entity online, like having like a brand or having like a store, and not in the sense of like, you know, like when no one's trying to like bamboozle anybody or like sell people like a bill of goods. It's just people make their stuff. They have a way to promote their stuff. It's a channel and a lane. And I think if it's easier to build that lane online, that's really where people are going to find things. Like, I think most of the music I've heard that's on the newer end of the spectrum all came from people that were content creators. Mm. I'm on the generation that's probably on the cusp of old school and new school, because I can sit all day and like reminisce about how I loved buying records at Tower. But I also can sit and talk about how much I've loved the music I've discovered online, you know? And honestly, my career as an artist, I benefited a lot from the wave that existed from like 2004 to say the era of streaming, because, you know, I had 2 records that still sold pretty well off of iTunes, you know? And so even though I wasn't paying my rent off of that, that was a pretty decent amount of income that basically like was, you know, like I made back on my investment to make those records, but like, you know, and not only that, like those things got me work. So I think, to go back to what we're talking about, having some kind of an ecosystem that feels natural, that isn't really so far-fetched from like what someone's wheelhouse is. I think that's like the thing that really makes it work, you know? And so me doing this is like sticking my toe in the water and figuring out, okay, what else can I do and how can I build the other things?
I mean, part of my wanting to have you do this, you know, because there are a lot of people who have been doing it a long time and they can talk about how to monetize it and things like that, and you're not there yet. But why I wanted you to do this, other than I think you're intelligent and have a lot to say as well, is because I really want to try to get musicians to try. It's really a hard time. Some days feel great, some days don't. But if we just focus on we can't play, it's going to feel like doomsday every day. Right. But this is a great opportunity to do exactly what you're doing, and that's why I had you come, because I think we need to talk about this being a period to find, you know, like when I went to New York, I just wanted to play bass, but then I started writing more music and I had my own band, and then I was like in a somebody's like TV show for like playing in the back, and I was like, oh well, maybe you could do things like you start to think about all these different aspects of your personality and your interests that you maybe haven't really mined yet, and now is a great time for that, because musicians are not making a lot of money anyway. Without COVID, we're not making a lot of money, so this is a great time to say, what else can I do? What's my side hustle that I also really enjoy, that's a strength in my personality? Yeah,
I mean, I also really like, I don't know, like for me, composition is as much a part of what I like doing as playing. So I've been learning a lot of different things and working on my production skills. Like, I mean, I've been pretty engaged with creativity in spite of not being able to play, you know? Like the last 2 gigs I had were great gigs, man. Like I was playing with Mark Lettieri and
Nice.
you know, like Sean
Sean.
yeah. it was cool, man. Like we did a bunch of gigs, and then that was it. Like it was curtains. Like, and then the following Wednesday was like the Sean Wright. Sorry, not Sean Chase. That's another drummer, Sean Wright. Yeah, Sean's amazing. Like that, the Wednesday that they announced lockdown, I was in a studio session, and it was like in between every take, people were like this. You know, everyone was like, "What the hell's going on?" And I kind of knew that was going to be the last one for a while. That was around people and stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. It's weird.
It is, man. But I love what you're doing with your time right now, man. It's inspiring, and I hope that we can all, you know, find a way to try to be as positive as we can. And these things are things that once we do get back to the world and we can be around people and play together, those things that we're creating now, they don't have to go away. They can be a continuation. And I think that's really positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Anybody else have another question?
Yeah.
Please, man. Jay.
Hey, hey, man. Hey, Steve, do you have a certain template or format of, you know, your line of questioning? Has that morphed since the beginning of this?
It has.
Okay.
But all I do is just kind of start by, well, now it's loose, but initially it just turns into like, it starts as like, hey, what's happening? You know, like that's it. Like, or how's it going?
How are you dealing with COVID right now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I feel like if you can just say like, hey, what's going on? Or, you know, you just kind of open up how you would like if you were just hanging with someone. That's mostly how I do it. Like, I try not to steer it after that. Like at this point, I just kind of let it go. I don't have, like, for a while I was asking people like if there's any movies or books or like TV shows they're watching, and maybe like I'll ask that, but I'll rephrase that a few different ways. But generally, no, it just sort of fans out from like, how's it going? And then if there are things that are unique to the person, that's, you know, that they, I don't know, like I think it's it's less interviewing now, because I found that like a lot of the discussion can steer what questions are, you know, are interesting that pertain to that person. I definitely think there's some things that, depending on who it is, like they're good questions to ask, I guess. Like there's good things that like, or specific things I'd want to know. Like when I was talking to Mike Keneally, he worked on that Devin Townsend record, Empath. And, you know, there were things about his involvement that I didn't know about. Like I didn't know to what extent he was arranging, or like, so, you know, like stuff like that. I'm trying to think of other things. I try to like discuss things that are pertinent to the person I'm talking to. But at this point, no, it's pretty much improvisational. For a while, I had a bunch of Post-it notes with like questions and shit, you know, or it was almost like oblique strategies where it just was like, talk about this. But generally, most people who are good at conversation, it doesn't need all that, you know. Only a couple times have I had that experience where it's like, shit, this is moving kind of slow.
having to pull material out of someone, kind of thing. Like,
yeah,
it's like just pull some questions, or because you'd mentioned about Fuse that you're having to kind of like juggle some material out of him, kind of stuff like that. Yeah.
Yep.
So what metric do you plan, if you are looking at numbers or even vaguely paying attention to it, what metric would you pursue any sponsorship?
Oh, I don't even know. Like I'm at the point now where it's like, I'm just trying to have a bunch of different things, and I'm just trying to have a bunch of different people on and like make a bunch of consistently cool episodes. And then I think maybe by the end of the summer, I might look at the numbers and see where it's actually going. Because it's not like I advertise, and it's not like you know, I mean, Bass Player did a thing for their blog, or Bass Magazine, not Bass Player, Bass Magazine, which was formerly Bass Player. But the erroneous thing about that is it's not really a bass podcast. Like, it's really, you know, we don't talk about anything, you know, like it's really not that at all. So, I don't really know how people like find these types of things, but what I do know is, like, if I talk about it on Instagram, or if I get people to like check it out via other places, I haven't been able to measure where stuff comes from, but I would say it probably all helps. But I don't know. Like, that's to be determined.
I like the idea that you know, because I'm sure everybody is going to it, like, who are bass players primarily at this point. But I think it's really cool. It'll be interesting to see if it flips at some point. You just start getting listeners who are interested in musicians and music aside from being a bass player, because that's what you're known for. That'd be a really cool flip for you.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's all part of it. I think that's the thing. I mean, it's probably ambitious in a way only because it's not about bass stuff. You know, so it's like, I think it would be disappointing for someone that wants to like learn about, I don't know, like, how do I play in odd times? It's like, we're talking about how times are odd. We're not talking about odd times, you know, like, you know, that's, I think that's the thing, but that's like part of what I do. I mean, that whole thing, like having a perspective is part of it. And so, like, you know, I don't have any real reason to think that like people would want to hear that, but I don't know, man. It's like, here's what gave me permission to do this though. Like, if you find yourself on YouTube just watching shit and you're in a rabbit hole and you're watching someone talk about like, this is the box that like my new audio interface came in, and like, then I can make a podcast. You know what I mean? Like, that's, if something like that's gonna have like 80,000 views, then like I can, you know, like, why not just, I'm not making fun of it. I'm just saying, like, the human attention span is capable of many different things, and someone will check it out.
That's amazing.
Fact, man.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, anybody else? One more question?
Oh, I have a
Lucas.
question.
Yeah.
Do you have the ambition to reach a more broader public, like not only musicians, but people that like podcasts?
Yeah. It's not, I don't really think, I think the only time maybe it could get a little bit narrow is like, you know, musicians talking about gear. I know sometimes like there's been times with people where we've talked about specific gear, you know, or equipment that people use. And that might be where people turn off. They're like, well, I don't care about this. Like, what am I going to use that for? Like, I have a friend who does a show where he's figured out a way to play with musicians using the internet where there isn't any latency. Like, he's figured out this formula to make it work. And he describes that on the podcast. And I you know, I don't know how useful that would be to somebody, but I'm going to leave it in there. That's going to be a weird episode because like he uses effects on his voice, and then I'm going to use effects on my voice just to.
Who is that?
Teddy Kumpel, who's like this amazing guitar player. Yeah, Teddy's awesome. But so I think that's the thing. Like, some of that stuff may not be as relatable, but I think just people who are you know, creative professionals, and that could be any kind of creative professional, really, just hearing people sort of talk about what they're doing. You know, it's not unique to musicians, like, and even people who have like corporate jobs or whatever, people are working from home. There's all kinds of things it's not just, but you know, I guess the angle or the hook per se is like, I'm talking to creative professionals mostly about that kind of stuff.
Do you see yourself interviewing non-musicians and people in other fields as well?
Yeah. No, I would love to talk to like comedians or like people that do graphic stuff or you know, I don't know, like cam girls. Who knows, man? Like because I think no, because I really think
Heck yeah.
that these are all things that, like, you know, these are industries that either flourish or are impacted by the current state of, like,
That's
the
a
world
fact.
because of COVID. So no, I mean, I'll talk to anybody. I mean, I think there's a couple places I'm not willing to go, and especially because, like, you know, I'm not trying to be the mayor, and I definitely think there are things that, like, okay, so here's the other part of that question. Like, when you say broader audience, like, I'm not shy about my political affiliations or my opinions. And, like, while I would hope that we're in a world where people would be able to understand that that's a nuanced discussion and it's not like sports, I'm perfectly fine if someone hears that and it turns them off. Like, I'm not worried about it, because chances are they're not going to like most of what they have to say. But, or maybe it's like, I know personally, I don't mind a discussion with somebody, even if I don't agree with them on everything. Like, I don't need that. Like, I don't listen to stuff to be validated. But I think, you know, the risk of talking about things like that means you're going to possibly like alienate some people, and I'm okay with that. You know, that's something I've thought about a lot, is in musical terms too. It's like all these people that tour, now that you know that, like, there's this percentage of the country that doesn't believe in science, like, do you want to play your music for them? I don't know, man. Like, it's like a weird thing, which I don't think people are really ready to have that discussion. But like, you know, honestly, I'm not trying to alienate people, but I'm not trying to kiss anybody's ass or, like, pretend to be something I'm not, just because I think it's gonna, because you know, I'm not making any money off of this, so I may as well keep it. You know, I'm not trying to, like, hate on anything, but I am trying to call things as I see them if it calls for that. But, like, you know, I'm not a pundit either, and, like, that's not my job, and there's far better people that can op-ed about some of that stuff. It's just one of those things where it's like, you know, I think it's really hard to be in the space that we're in right now and not touch on it. Because even if I believe science is really the thing that should be driving the bus, unfortunately, that's not the whole part of the conversation. And so, you know, like, I think it's uncomfortable for people. It's not something most people want to talk about, yet I do think it is part of it. So I don't know. And it's weird, you know, like, I don't know if you heard the Alex Skolnick episode, but the thing I love, you heard it?
Not yet, no.
Okay, yeah, it's cool. Alex is an amazing musician.
I love him, man. Yeah.
He gets, whenever he expresses something political on Twitter, all the metal blogs kind of grab it like it's news. Like, Alex Skolnick said he was going to support Elizabeth Warren, and then you go on Twitter, or no, you go on, like, Instagram, and people write all this shit like, I'm going to burn all your albums, and he's like, burn them. and then they're like, well, and then he's like, and then they come back like, well, actually, man, I'm not going to burn all your records. It's like, all right, that's fine. You know,
that's cool too.
I read that whole thread, man. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the thing. Like, I would never want to belittle somebody, or I would never want to, yeah, it's tough because it's really easy to, you know, and I'm not always great with this, but, like, I wouldn't want to discourage anybody from hanging, but I won't be false about who I am, you know, and I definitely would be interested in dialogue more than, like, an adversarial exchange, because I don't think that fixes anything. I think that just reasserts what side of whatever someone's on. And I think, really, you know, I'm not going to be all kumbaya about it, but I think there's nothing good comes from that. No. You know? So yeah, I don't know. I think for me, it's more about trying to be honest about, like, what my angle is. Like, I think my show has a point of view, definitely, but it's not really, like, it's not meant to, like, drive people away. You know, so that's, I don't know. interesting thing. I haven't seen anything negative yet from it, but I'm sure there's people that like have listened to 2 minutes and nope, not listening to it.
Yeah.
And that's fine, you know.
Yeah, I mean, that's okay. I think there's something for everybody out there. But I do think that what you do appeals to most anybody. I have yet to hear anything that, I mean, also, we probably have a very similar viewpoint of the world and politics,
Right.
but so I might not be the best person to say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those types of elements now where I don't know, like I think a lot of what me and the people who I've had on so far, like, we're not really talking about, you know, like, we're like, I'm not going to have an episode where it's like, all right, let's talk about defunding the police.
Yeah.
But like, you know, I may talk about, you know, I mean, like when I had Divinity on, because I thought that was one I put in right after, because even though, you know, there's things about social media and activism I really like. I think sometimes people got to be careful, like, why they're doing stuff. Like,
Yeah.
is it performative, or are you actually trying to just spread the word? Divinity, you know, she's going to tell me things that only someone of her ilk can say. Like, you know, she's a, you know, and it's better for me to talk to someone who can speak to those things versus me just saying like, hey, here's my take on systematic racism. You know, we didn't really talk about that the whole time. And I also talked to Mark Kelly from The Roots, who's a good buddy of mine. That's coming up pretty soon. I mean, but I think, honestly, like, I've always talked about these things with my friends. Like with Vernon, you know, Vernon and I, we've always talked about racism in music. You know, that's always been part of the conversation. Like, talking to Fuzinski's like biracial. Like, we always talk about race. Talking to like Ahmed Best about racism. You know, like, I mean, that's always been part of the discussion. You know, and I think there's things that we could have talked about more, but I mean, there are also things that are well known if you followed those interviews.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, but Divinity, like, I was gonna have her on anyway, and it just, we talked right around the time all this shit went down, and so it was like, all right, you know, I'm gonna put this out first because there seems to be this not weird, but like people are being very deliberate about what they want to post on their things, and it's like, well, she's saying things that are pretty valuable that I think people would be interested in hearing, you know, or just, you know, there's like value in this discussion, you know, and like, she's an interesting person because not only is she like black, but she's like, you know, she's married and she's like, you know, LGBT, like she has a wife, you know, and that's like a very unique place in the world because there's the system that, you know, I don't know, like, so, and that wasn't born of like, all right, let's get some diversity, you know, it's like, it was just more like, we have different people on here that can speak to different things. You know, I don't know, like, I definitely think if there's a way to do it that feels organic and natural, then I'm cool to talk about that stuff. But even still, you know, she and I, we talk about very down the middle things for the most part, you know. So yeah, I think that's, you know, I think it's, I'm open to whoever wants to listen, but I also am not, I think I've picked enough of a lane though that it has a point of view. It won't appeal to certain people, and that's fine, you know.
Yeah. That's great, man. Well, listen, we've had you for a long time now, and I really can't thank you enough. I don't want to take up too much of your time more, but actually, man, this has been great because this is the fourth one of the month. I've had one every week, and this thing completely started like absolutely improvisational. You know, in the others I had something I was going to say about you and everything. But this was great, man. It just started right off. It was really natural. So all I'm going to say to everybody here and anybody who watches this later, I'll post it on YouTube tomorrow. If you don't know Steve Jenkins already, just please check out his music and his podcast. What Steve has been doing musically for years now has influenced a lot of people and has been important to a lot of people. So please check that end out, and do check out his podcast. I really think it's unique and interesting and important to the time. But just thank you, Steve. Super
Thanks for
appreciate it,
having me.
man.
Thank you.
Yeah,
All right.
man.
Thank you.
All right,
All right.
everybody.
All
Thanks
right,
for
brother.
coming.
You got it.
Bye-bye.
Talk to you soon, brother.
All right, see you.
Thank you.